Hello, everyone. Mr. Klein here. Today, we're going to talk about the FRQs for the AP Macroeconomics exam. I'm going to go over the FRQs, talk about the test administration, and I'll also provide a solution from an FRQ question from 2019. But first, let's talk about what's happening with the administration of the test because of the COVID conditions. Your schools will have a variety of testing options. There are going to be 3 administrative windows. The old-fashioned taking the test on-site with paper will be May 10th. Your district has the option of administering the test online using digital exams on May 17th or June 2nd. And your district might also offer you the chance to take the digital test at home, though the dates are also May 17th or June 2nd. I understand from talking with the AP proctors who get different communications from ETS that the digital options will not have charts. You will not be drawing graphs on the digital tests. So that makes it very, very important to think that you're going to be telling a story and you're going to be explaining the answers either in writing or based on the test questions. So telling the story is a key to a 5. Let's think about the FRQs for a second. There are 3 FRQs on the macro exam. 1 is longer and 2 is short. You'll have 1 hour for the FRQ compared to 70 minutes for the short answers, multiple choice. And the 1 hour includes a 10-minute reading period. It's going to be important if you're taking the digital option to use that 10-minute reading period because you have to really think about what are they asking. Remember that everything is very, very direct and clear, and they only want you to answer what you're being asked. So think about that carefully. 33% of the AP exam is the FRQs. The first question is 10 points. The second 2 questions are 5 points each. So therefore, we want to spend half of the time of question 1 and the other half of the time of questions 2 and 3. The real bottom line is after you take the AP review course, you're going to have seen so many solutions. You're going to learn that the ETS is essentially testing you on 5 economic principles and concepts of macro. And you're going to have seen those 5 questions over and over again, year after year. That means that you'll be able to easily interpret the graphs to tell the story. Be relaxed. Think of that the question was asked by a friend. Students are very, very good at explaining ideas to their peers. And also talk out your response. If you ever watch the show Wheel of Fortune, there might be a challenging word and the host will say to the competitor, talk it out, talk it out. And it's really fun to watch because after talking it out, sometimes they get the right answer. So when you're stuck, actually start talking it out in your mind. Remember, you're telling the story and the answer is there. In terms of if they ask you for a free response, the answers are always short. There's never an essay on the FRQ for macro. The answers will be yes, no, unchanged, better off, worse off, higher, lower. You'll never need to write more than 1 complete sentence on a macro FRQ. All right, so how do we set up for success? Get on the road to a 5. This is question 2 from set 1 from the 2019 macro AP exam. Assume the expected inflation rate in a country is 3%, the current unemployment rate is 6%, and the natural rate of unemployment is 4%. Draw a correctly labeled graph of the short run and long run Phillips curves. Label the current short run equilibrium as point X and plot the numerical values above on the graph. So what we're looking at here is we're going to get points for correctly labeling the graph. We want to know how to draw the short run Phillips curve and the long run Phillips curve. We also want to circle the numbers because we know that those 3 numbers are going to appear on our graph someplace. And the last thing that we're thinking about with question A is where are we going to put that equilibrium point of X? On the right is a correctly drawn chart that was created by Mr. Weaver, who is a friend to the AP economic teachers across the country. And because it was very clearly designed, I'm choosing Mr. Weaver's graph as an illustration. So what do we know? First of all, we always put inflation rate on the left axis. Unemployment rate always goes on the bottom axis. The long run Phillips curve is always a vertical line, always goes in the middle of the chart. And the long run Phillips curve equals the natural rate of unemployment. That's something that you need to commit to memory. The question will ask you about the natural rate of unemployment, which is 4%. But here it's always the long run Phillips curve. So you have that go straight down. And because they told you that 4% is the long run unemployment rate, you write 4% under the LRPC. The short run Phillips curve is always drawn as a 45-degree angle starting at 11 o'clock in the top left and going southeast towards the top right. Don't connect it to the axis. Draw it like this, where there's space on both sides, and write SRPC in the bottom right. There's only one inflation number in our prompt, which is the expected inflation rate. Where do you put the expected inflation rate? You put that at the equilibrium of the long run Phillips curve and the short run Phillips curve. The equilibrium point is right in the middle of the line. Have a line going horizontally over and write 3% on the inflation rate axis. So now we have to put the number 6. Where are we putting the number 6? Well, we know that the number 6 is the current unemployment rate, so it has to be on that axis. And because the economics charts start with 0 in the bottom left corner and always go higher as you go right, the number 6 has to be to the right of the number 4. You put the number 6 next to the number 4, give yourself some space so they're not right on top of each other. And then you take your magic finger. Your magic finger is always going to get you at least 2 points, maybe 3 on the FRQs. You take your magic finger, you go straight up from the number 6, and boom, as soon as your finger hits a line, you stop, and that's where you draw the X on your chart, because that's the current condition of the economy. FRQs test students on understanding what's the current macroeconomic condition of the United States economy. Are we in a recession, a depression, high inflation? What do we need to do in terms of to have the economy on track? If you have 6% unemployment and the long-term unemployment is 4%, that means we're in a recession. This is known as cyclical unemployment. The cyclical unemployment is not included in your answer. You already have the right answer by labeling X at 6% on the SRPC. However, if you're taking the digital test, you always need to know the story immediately. So just tell yourself that this is a recession with cyclical unemployment. Question B is the actual inflation rate greater than, less than, or equal to the expected inflation rate? The expected inflation rate is the equilibrium in the long run of the economy. We know that we have a 6% unemployment, so that's in the short run. So how do we find the answer? By using our magic finger. We know from economics from the beginning of the year that we always have lines going to both axes to show us what our condition is, but we don't have another line on the inflation side. So we're going to take our magic finger, go straight over from X. As soon as we hit the axis for inflation, boom, we stop. And where's our finger? Our finger is below 3%. It's below 3% as we go straight over from X, which is 6%. The number is going to be lower. You can write 2.75, but you don't have to. You just make sure the line is going across. And because 0 is in the bottom left corner, your finger is ending at a point that's lower than 3%. Lower than 3% is less than. The expected inflation rate is less than 3%. That's your answer. See, you told that story very easily. C, assume loans were made taking into account the expected inflation rate of 3%. Will lenders be better off, worse off, after they realize the actual inflation rate identified in Part B? Okay, so sometimes you take in a test and you're able to figure out the answer to a previous question by reading a subsequent question. That's not going to happen on the AP test. They have professional test writers and they're not your friend. They're there to test you. So you have to make sure that you always get the correct answers. So a further question will also be correct. So we already said that inflation is going to be lower. So what does lower inflation mean to a lender? That's a macroeconomic concept that has to do with money lending and money supply. So when we see the words expected inflation, real inflation, and FRQ, we're being asked about a concept of what is the real rate of return for banks. Banks need to make a real rate of return because that's where their profit comes from. So students like practical knowledge. Practical knowledge here is that whenever a bank makes a loan, it doesn't matter what year it is and what the inflation rate is, they always build in a real rate of return so they make money on the loan. What students need to know for the macro AP exam is to memorize that when expected inflation is lower, it makes lenders better off. And when expected inflation rate is higher, it makes the borrowers better off. That is a very common multiple choice question. I'm talking about how mortgage rates have gone up. Does that help the borrower or the lender? When long-term mortgage rates go up, it helps the existing mortgager that already borrowed the money. So when you have lower inflation in the future for a bank, it helps them and makes them better off. You have to commit that to memorization. D, based on the relationship, I'm sorry, I have my prompt in the middle here. Based on the relationship between the actual and the expected inflation rate identified in Part A, what will happen to the natural rate of unemployment in the long run? Okay, so Mr. Weaver's graph is over to the right. That is the answer to Part A. So we need to answer the question by understanding what is the natural rate of unemployment. So we have to access our memory banks. And what was natural rate again? That was frictional plus structural. What's the definition of frictional unemployment? That's the time in between when a person that's unemployed finds another job. What's the definition of structural unemployment? That means that a person that's looking for a job does not have the skills that are currently demanded by industrial and technology firms. So the worker has to become trained because there's a mismatch of skills. That's called structural unemployment. When we answered A, and I said that we have to tell a story whenever we look at a chart, what's the story with this answer? It's cyclical unemployment because it's a recessionary gap. Because the unemployment rate is 6%, it means the economy has slowed down. So firms have not had to hire as many people because consumers are not buying as much stuff. When you have cyclical unemployment, it never moves the long run Phillips curve. The long run Phillips curve is the long run average of unemployment whenever the economy is in sync. So you don't move the long run Phillips curve just because you have a condition that people are looking for a job or some workers don't have skills that are necessary and they have to be retrained. Those two conditions, which are natural rates of unemployment, do not move the long run Phillips curve. It stays exactly where it is. Therefore, the answer to this question is no change in the natural rate of unemployment. If you can see the story that I just told from looking at this chart and you truly get it, you'll get a 5 in the AP exam. Good luck.